How to set up Plex, and watch your movies on any device. A Plex media server makes it simple to stream or share your film and music assortment, the identical approach that you simply stream Netflix or Hulu. No problem, no fuss, simply dump all of your media within the server and stream it to any gadget. However, organizing a Plex server is simpler mentioned than achieved, particularly when there are such a lot of totally different units that may operate as a Plex server. We're going to undergo all of the merchandise that you must arrange a Plex server, together with a whole lot of the non-compulsory stuff. However, that is solely a product information. A PC to run the Plex media server. A very powerful part of your Plex server is the PC that manages your media, records data and runs the Plex software program. This laptop must be small and energy environment friendly, because it requires a wired web connection and can run 24/7. In fact, it can save you some huge cash turning any previous PC or laptop computer right into a Plex server. However, such a machine will take up a whole lot of area and use a whole lot of energy. Which OS ought to you use? Plex works on home Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and devoted NAS techniques just like the Synology disk station. Home Windows and Mac OS-based servers provide comparable efficiency to Linux-based servers, so when you aren't comfy with Linux, don't hassle utilizing it. That mentioned, Linux is good as a result of it requires little upkeep and could be very energy environment friendly. In the event you're aware of Linux, attempt utilizing a distro and not using a GUI to save lots of laptop sources and maximize efficiency. NAS options are a bit tough. Some individuals use a NAS gadget to carry and handle media alongside their Plex server, whereas others run your entire operation, server and all, on a single NAS gadget. Consolidating the whole lot right into a NAS gadget makes your Plex server smaller and simpler to handle. However, NAS units which can be highly effective sufficient to maintain up with Plex's calls for are just a little costly. What are the Plex hardware necessities? You don't want a lot horsepower to run a Plex server. Any machine made in the previous couple of years ought to match the Plex hardware requirements, which name for an i3 processor and 2 GB of RAM. In fact, you'll get pleasure from higher efficiency on an extra highly effective system, and most Plex enthusiasts counsel utilizing an i5 processor and 4 GB of RAM, or higher. A beefier system is good for 4K streaming, simultaneous multi-device streaming, or distant streaming outdoors of your house. These hardware necessities get just a little fuzzy if you construct a Plex server from a NAS gadget, a Raspberry Pi, or another non-traditional resolution. In the event you plan to run your Plex server on a NAS gadget, verify the detailed Plex NAS compatibility spreadsheet to search out one which is highly effective sufficient on your wants. Each the Raspberry Pi 4 and NVIDIA Shield TV Pro can stream Plex in 4K, so persist with these merchandise if you'd like a small, low-cost, non-PC Plex server. Which machine ought to you use for Plex? In the event you're completely new to Plex, I counsel beginning your journey with a small and low-cost gadget just like the Raspberry Pi 4 or NVIDIA Shield TV Pro. These units are 4K capable and intensely fashionable, so there are many sources that will help you set the whole lot up. Plus, the Pi 4 and NVIDIA Protect TV Professional are very simple to repurpose or resell when you lose curiosity in Plex. A PC-based Plex server provides extra flexibility and energy than a Raspberry Pi, NVIDIA Protect, or NAS gadget, particularly if mentioned PC has upgradable parts. Once more, you should use any PC that matches the Plex hardware necessities. However, many PCs just like the Intel NUC are the gold customary due to their small footprint, energy effectivity, and low worth. Intel NUC units don't include RAM or an OS, which most fanatics favor, as aftermarket RAM isn't that costly and Linux working techniques are free. However, when you aren't comfy utilizing Linux or shoving parts right into a motherboard, then pre-built home Windows 10 units just like the Lenovo ThinkCentre or HP ProDesk are most likely your finest guess. However, what if you wish to run the whole lot off of a NAS gadget? Whereas NAS units don't have the horsepower or reusability of PCs, they're extremely energy environment friendly and might help you obtain a clear setup. Additionally, a NAS gadget makes it simple to again up a number of copies of your Plex library. That's kinda what they're made for. If Plex endorses a NAS gadget in its compatibility spreadsheet, then it ought to fulfill all of your wants. I simply have one fast tip: don't purchase a NAS gadget with just 1 or 2 drive bays. A NAS gadget with 4 or extra drive bays, just like the Synology DiskStation DS920 Plus, can maintain a number of copies of your media library, growing safety and maximizing the accessible area in your drives. The Intel NUC is a bare-bones mini PC that is good for Plex. Add some RAM, throw in your favorite Linux distro, and benefit from the trip. Synology DiskStation DS920. The 4-bay Synology DiskStation DS920 Plus has sufficient horsepower to run a dependable Plex server, and may accommodate 4 drives for max storage and safety. Storage for your media library. Until your chosen Plex server has a ton of onboard storage, you're gonna want an exterior drive to deal with your films, reveals, music, and different media records data. Fortunately, you don't want uncostly SSD to deal with this process. A less expensive HDD is okay for storing Plex media and gain at impression the standard of your streaming. Which HDD ought you use for media? I counsel utilizing an NAS Arduous drive just like the WD Red Plus on your Plex setup, or another server setup. As a result of NAS HDDs run slower and subsequently have an extended lifespan than common HDDs. The decreased pace is not going to have an effect on streaming high quality, because the drive's solely job is to retrieve media records data on your Plex server. Sadly, you'll additionally want an external drive enclosure to attach this type of HDD to your Plex server by way of USB, except your server is a PC with open drive bays or a NAS gadget. In the event you don't need to pay further for a NAS HDD and exterior drive enclosure, you possibly can use a consumer-grade exterior HDD just like the WD Passport as an alternative. Simply remember the fact that it'll die sooner and eat extra energy than a NAS HDD. Ought you use an SSD as a boot drive? Whereas there's no purpose to retailer your media on an SSD, there are advantages to utilizing an SSD as your Plex media server system drive. Like another laptop, your Plex server will boot quicker with an SSD system drive, and it is best to discover much less lag whereas navigating its library. In the event you're utilizing an previous PC to energy your Plex server, contemplate changing its boot drive with an affordable, low-capacity SSD, such because the Kingston A400. In the event you're utilizing a Raspberry Pi or NVIDIA Protect gadget, don't fear about it, your gadget boots from flash storage. What about backups? Keep in mind, Arduous drives and SSDs don't final perpetually. In the event you can spare some money, you may need to seize a backup drive for all of your media records data. You possibly can set home Windows to robotically again up content material to this spare drive with the working system's built-in backup tool, or obtain the identical outcomes on Linux with Resync. NAS units are purpose-built for RAID backups, and as I discussed earlier, a NAS gadget with 4 drive bays is way more safe and offers extra usable space for storing than a tool with simply 2 drive bays. You must play with the Synology RAID calculator to discover a setup that's best for you. Video information to populate your library. A Plex server is ineffective and not using a media library. In an ideal world, you possibly can purchase films and reveals from the Plex app and obtain them onto your Plex media server. However, we don't stay in an ideal world, so you must supply your video records data from a few DRM-free distributors, DVDs, and Blu-ray discs. Plex servers are a preferred resolution for streaming music, however, as a result of downloading and ripping music is such a simple process, we aren't going to call it right here. Sourcing video information. You possibly can't purchase digital copies of films for Plex. Not from main distributors like Apple and Vudu. These distributors lock their content material behind DRM, making it inconceivable to play mentioned records data without permission from the distributor's community or playback software program. You can remove the DRM from most media records data, however it's a ache within the butt. Plus, paying an organization for DRM protected records data is irritating, as the corporate clearly doesn't respect your property personal the belongings you pay for. The one notable platforms that promote DRM-free films are Vimeo On Demand, Drafthouse Films, and a few small VHX-powered sites. However, these distributors principally promote indie movies, so that you're gonna have to tear mainstream films from DVDs and Blu-rays. In the event you're searching for one thing that's within the public area, you'll be able to most likely obtain it totally free on the Internet Archive. Good luck discovering DRM-free film downloads anyplace else. Ripping DVDs and Blu-ray discs. Ripping discs is one of the simplest ways to legally fill your Plex library. DVDs and Blu-ray discs are simple to search out for reasonable, particularly when you hunt for gross sales on FB Market or dig via the dusty cabinets of your native Goodwill. And whereas sitting down to tug the film from the disc is an annoying further step, it's higher than nothing. Until your PC has a built-in disk drive, you'll want to purchase an external DVD drive or Blu-ray drive that plugs into your laptop's USB port. As soon as that's plugged in, you want software programmed to tear the film out of your discs. I counsel utilizing Handbrake to protect the standard of your ripped records data. What is transcoding? Media records data aren't common, and among the units in your house are unable to play sure file codecs. Because of this, Plex can transcode media on the fly, changing video records data to a format that's appropriate for his or her vacation spot gadget. In case your server has a CPU that matches the Plex hardware requirements, you then shouldn't run into lag or transcoding buffer throughout regular use. That mentioned, issues might come up when you stream to a number of units that require video transcoding on the similar time. In case your Plex server doesn't have a whole lot of horsepower, you'll be able to keep away from video transcoding totally by changing all your media records data to MP4, which is the common file format recommended by Plex. Keep in mind that transcoding points are uncommon throughout common streaming, and for what it's price, Plex fanatics counsel utilizing the MKV file format to retain the standard of films ripped from Blu-ray. I ought to level out that the Plex Pass subscription unlocks an unique, hardware, transcoding setting, which makes use of your laptop's GPU, versus the CPU, to transcode video. Those that plan to do a ton of distant streaming, which requires video transcoding to scale back the stream's bandwidth, ought to think about using this, hardware, transcoding setting to take a load off their server's CPU. Built-in graphics in Intel chips is okay for this process, as are low-cost graphics playing cards just like the GTX 1030. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe. Don't forget to share.